this work really, I think, and I've talked to Amanda about this, it really reignites the passion and reminds us of the reason why we're doing this really crazy and difficult job. It reminds us to reconnect with our students as humans, which honestly, sometimes it can be really challenging when there's agendas and, you know, curriculum and things that you want to get through, but really focusing on connecting with the other human that's across the desk or, you know, walking through the halls it's why I got into this profession. And like, even though I'm not like super deep into my profession, into my career, it's something that like I have to remind myself of. And this work has been really helpful in grounding me in that every day. So.
Well, I learned a lot, and the first thing is I am very appreciative for having this opportunity, you know, to learn with all of you, from you. But I would highlight empathy. I mean, by doing this learning experience, I've been exposed to a lot of empathy, and I say there not only from my brain but also from my heart, and more difficult, even more importantly, empathy that is active. I mean, that's why I'm saying compassionate. I mean, it's just that I want to start doing things and changing my practice.
I think that I'm so grateful for the strength and connection that I have with the Cogen group and other students that are walking into this space. I think I've always had an act to connect with students, but it's really taken it to a deeper level of really giving them more voice and agency, instead of like a place of I'm going to talk and I'll lead you into how you're going to feel in these moments. They're guiding the conversations and where they go and the lessons and where they go. And it's made teaching easier in a sense when it comes to assessment. It's authentic and it's coming from the students and what they want to do. And they are seeing the space differently. They are feeling more invited in the space, and it's bringing other people into the space that I don't even teach. And I feel like I'm a big sister walking alongside them and learning alongside them, arm in arm, as opposed to this dictatorship of I'm your teacher and you are the students. It feels teamwork like. Yeah.
You know what I'm seeing is I'm seeing a lot of people my age are retiring because they don't like the changes that are going on in a lot of fields, not just education. My children's father was over for Thanksgiving, and he long legal profession, and it's like I don't like doing trials on Zoom, and I don't like not meeting face to face with people, and you know, there's such a rate of change, and I don't want to be one of those teachers who retires because I don't want to change. But the change is challenging and difficult in today's political and social climate for a white person. I mean, I don't know who else, I can only speak for myself.
I just really have appreciated getting to learn from all the listening that people have done as part of this work. And I think sometimes there's things we think we know or kind of know, but when we really stop and listen, especially to students, it gave me new insights. And I also did some of the empathy interviews with students and appreciated getting to hear about empathy interviews that my colleagues did. And I just found that was a really inspirational reminder of how important it is to make time to slow down. And I'm hoping to apply that, and I've been thinking about how to apply that with some listening to staff here at the school too, and some ways to do that. And I haven't made as much progress as I would have liked, but yeah, just the importance of listening and and seeing people engage in that has been inspirational.
You know, as the principal, we've had some turnover from last year and new staff. And sometimes when there's new fish in the bowl, some of us watched something called This Is Water yesterday. And when there's new fish in the bowl, what has caused me to do is to reflect on the gains we've made from last year. And it doesn't feel like there's been any gains at times. But through conversations I've had with new staff, I'm able to articulate, yes, but this is where we were, but now we're here. And what really draws my attention to the change equity framework here is that it is a theory of action. It's action oriented, and it's hard and difficult, but you would not believe at various groupings of different kinds of meetings we have going on in our school. Like we have mentorship Mondays. We have things like a Cub Council, which is our curricular lead meetings. We have some of these teachers leading other teachers in exactly this work at another school. And the depth of conversation happening right now in all these different, maybe somewhat disconnected meetings, what it is now, the level of conversation compared to December 1 from last year, we were in survival mode at CNB. We were in survival mode. And now I'm seeing from some people in particular a mindset shift, or at least an acknowledgement of what we're talking about, a familiarity, or even possibly, I'm knocking on wood, buy-in. They're seeing things differently. And I think if we're even at the place where we can name things without it causing a fight, or someone not saying, you're 3 minutes over on our staff meeting, that's not happening anymore. So to me, it is a theory of action, and it is about equity and inclusion that I just for the first time feel like maybe we're starting to turn a corner. There's some traction. I'm so proud of our journey so far, and really proud of the teachers. Really, really proud.
I would say one of the things that I don't know that I learned or I'll take with me is just really listening to stories more. I echo what Veronica said, but then also something that I've learned is also how to get stories out of students better than I used to, like the right questions to ask and the follow-up questions to ask. I switched positions this year, so I'm working with students. I'm not a coach anymore. I'm doing reading intervention, and I have to walk with students from the first floor to the third floor. And, just that time in between, I've learned so much about them. And I feel like I'm much better at the right questions to ask to learn more about them, because they're first graders. They don't really give up a whole bunch on their own. So I think that's something I'll take with me.
I think just kind of moving through the process, you ebb and flow from like feeling these beautiful highs to like these extreme lows, but like ultimately there's a lot of hope that I'm feeling. I'm coming up on 10 years teaching now, which I kind of expected when I got to 10 years, I would finally feel like I had it down pat. I knew what I was doing. But if anything, having gone through this process, I'm extremely humbled by how little I really do know. And it's almost like this tearing everything down to the ground and then slowly starting to build it back up. And I could just see how how kids choose to engage with me and what they're willing and open to sharing. Like, it's only November and I'm into a French classroom, so I don't get to see my kids the same way I did last year. So just a couple kids that were comfortable enough sitting down doing an empathy interview, like that level of sharing, I don't know how they felt safe in doing that, but it might speak to a little bit of like the mindset and the mind shift around, you know, how I choose to approach a question or which information I'm trying to elicit. So I like to be humbled from time to time, because you don't always feel like you don't want to feel like you're doing everything right, because you know you're not. So that little slice of humble pie is very welcome. And I felt like a lot of that happened last year. And then even just kind of starting it over again with new kids, it's kind of right back to square one, rebuilding those relationships and going through the same process. But it's just it's a lot deeper than it ever was. And it goes back to what Lauren said about the passion that we had getting into teaching. It's not about teaching the curriculum. It's about working with kids, and even just walking away knowing that you've changed one kid. I'll get to that when we get to showing the artifact, because my kiddo from last year came back to the school to visit. And that was huge. That kid should never want to step foot in here again, but came back to visit and spend a whole day here. So, yeah.
So some of what I heard is empathy, change is hard, big sisterhood, coming back to the human side of why I became a teacher, listening to stories, building back up after tearing down, asking the right questions, and changing the discourse, or noticing how the discourse is shifting. It's really powerful stuff. So I thank you all, and I want to bring your attention quickly before I pass the baton to our very simple intentions for today. So number one, we've already kind of started with just beginning to reflect and really synthesize our journeys through this process that we've been going through. Number two, we're going to engage in a very simple public learning protocol to make sure that everybody who's gone through the cycle has a chance to reflect out loud about what they've learned and what they're taking away and emergent next steps. And then throughout the whole thing, we just want to be in a space of celebration together, celebrate the early wins, the small steps, the evidence, little pieces of evidence of transformation that we're all feeling and witnessing together. So if that sounds okay, I'll bring you back to our agreements, which we've used throughout the entire process. No one knows everything, but together we know a whole lot. I'm so excited today to just listen to the folks who are presenting and get to learn from what you've been trying and experimenting with and pushing yourself to do differently. We're going to really continue to embrace an abundance mindset and reject the tyranny of the deficit language that characterizes the field so often. Allow ourselves to be messy and inarticulate, not have to get everything perfect. Assume that we all have the best intent, but think about our impact, and then always centering students from the margins and allowing ourselves to be changed. And in the spirit of those agreements, I'm actually going to invite Elisé and Veronica and Erin to all witness today as our admin and coach partners, if you would. So you'll each have a couple minutes at the end to share back. And I think that is everything. Can I pass it to you, my friend?
That sounds great. I'm really excited to be a listener today. And this is our final formal session with you all. And it is the opportunity for us to now engage in public learning, which is also a big piece of this book. It's really being able to not just learn and engage in the equity transformation cycle, but to be able to share it back, both for ourselves and for our colleagues. And so to start us with that, I'm just going to read the quote at the top about public learning, because this comes from chapter 7, which our colleague Carrie Wilson wrote about. So here's the quote at the top. It says, "The practice of public learning elevates the curiosity, awareness, and care needed to build effective adult learning. It explicitly and continuously shines a light on the adult social emotional capacities and ways of interacting required to support deep adult learning. It assumes that adults, like students, must continuously learn about themselves and systematically reflect on their growth and evolution." And I'm going to draw our attention to that last sentence, especially with Lindy in mind, as we're thinking about how difficult it is for students to share they're learning. It's the same thing for us, right? It's we're just, our babies are human, we're human. And so, this is about us trying to put some structure around it like we would do for our kiddos, but really provide a safe space for you to talk about your evolution of learning. And I am going to call on one of the agreements to help us before I kind of just frame the protocol. And that is really the one around we can't be articulate all the time. And I'm going to tie that to our early discussion with white supremacy culture. And I'm going to tie that to perfectionism, because now we're at this final moment and we're sharing the learning and we're asking you to share artifacts and evidence of this journey. And I'm sure for many of you, you're like, yeah, I could share something, but there's some things that have happened and gone well. There's some things that haven't. Please don't judge me when I share. Bring the pressure down. This is just an opportunity for us to share. Okay, so this is where I started. This is what I've tried. Here's what I've learned. This is what the impact has been. So I just want to reduce that down. Be yourselves. You don't have to be perfect at all. If you stumble, that's totally fine. The purpose is us sharing our learning with each other in hopes that this group learns something, but also the people who get to see this at home or wherever they are in classrooms and teams, and also get a chance to just get a sense of what other people's journey looks like. So we're going to do some public learning with a particular protocol. So each of you all will have 4 minutes to share. You're going to share what was your intention when you went into the equity transformation cycle. You're going to share what evidence or artifacts you've gathered that are starting or are beginning to tell the story of change, because we know this is an evolution. And then you're going to share how you have grown or transformed in the process. And if you want a little reminder on the examples of artifacts, I know you all prepared some of this ahead of time, just 2 to 3 pieces of evidence that show some of the change. It could be artifacts, could be student work, it could be a particular piece of an empathy interview, photos, whatever feels the most relevant to you or what you can share in your artifacts. And then after you share for 4 minutes, we're going to take time for the team to just respond to you around what touched or moved you. And if we want to share any invitations for further reflection, we'll put those in the chat. So you'll share, we'll respond, and then we'll keep it going. And at the end of this, we'll close with just an overall reflection from everyone in the group, including our witnessing from Erin and Veronica and Elisé.
The reason or the intention, what was my intention in going through this CTC? I would say that probably was just improving my equity practice as a teacher, learn more from other teachers and professionals. But what was interesting, it was surprising for me too, was that I find out in this journey that more importantly than improving my equity practice, what I need is to have a different approach toward this equity practice. That means transforming myself and my educational environment, so that it goes really, really deep. One thing that I think this is actually an evidence for positive change is, while learning and thinking carefully the co-gen dialogues with my students, I engage in listening carefully and sharing feeling, ideas, and setting together a plan that is actually belongs to all of us. And while doing this, I had to embrace vulnerability that is hard to learn, hard to do. Leaving behind my social privileges, my power, and that's also in progress. Being aware of my social bias, also, that's very hard too. And what this implies, the educational racism that often have made me normalize assimilation, disregarding a student specificity, because I'm the teacher. I tell you what to do. And then also what I say in the beginning, being empathetic, that was so rich and so powerful for me. And I feel this as an evidence because I feel it. And while going through this transformation, I became also aware of the critical importance of agency in my students. And what I'm trying is not just then to be able to communicate with the peers and adults, but also to become responsible work citizens. And that requires, reset the whole education environment. And not only in my classroom here, but also trying to do this in the school, in the district. So probably the most clear evidence for this is that, well, I was talking to the 8th grade math teacher. I'm teaching 7th grade math. And we came out with the idea after many co-gens with my students. I understood that the social component is really, really a big element in their life. And they feel even fear, even talking or sharing, and that is actually in the way of getting this agency. So we started thinking that we could do, the first idea was just, how about if my students, a small cohort that we have in the class Flex, learn something and teach your students, and then you do the opposite. And I suggest this to my students, and they were totally afraid. I didn't want to do that. So we came up with the idea of play together a math game. And this is basically what we did. It's the first time I do this. I take all my students to 8th grade, they play together, and then we did 2 days later, we did the opposite. These are my 4 of my 7th grade students, and these are 4 of the 8th grade students. And this is my classroom, and they are all together. These are 7 and 8 all blended together. And they are playing a math game with a deck of cards. That is something relevant to the curriculum, because this is operation with integers. And they are not afraid to be together. They share, their ideas, they celebrate, because it was a little competition, but it was not really, very hard for them. So that was really beautiful. I mean, for me, it was that experience. This is just one step, and I'm gonna keep exploring ideas about this.
Thank you, Rafa. Thank you so much. And special love to you for going first in this public learning journey. But I would love to, I'm trying to make sure I don't say all these lovely things I want to say. I'm going to open it up to the group with agency and voice in mind. And just open it up for things that touched or moved you from what Rafa shared.
Rafa, I loved how you expanded out of your classroom and created community within other spaces. That's so great. That's so fantastic. And you made the focus on community and connection with other students and that social connection. That's really, really cool to see. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
I agree with Lindy in the chat there. My comment was about your vulnerability and really just sharing that took you to a deeper place of empathy and acting on that empathy and your deep listening that you've been working on. I think you are on such a beautiful track in your work.
Thank you.
2 things in the chat. Lindy said moving away from privilege into vulnerability is a spot on observation. And Erin said the positive energy shines through in the photos. And Shane said being willing to try something new and gamifying the math curriculum. And I just want to add, Rafa, you are a part of, your school is a part of the group I got to talk to first. And still sticks out to me when you were saying, I really want to think about reimagining education. Do you all remember that?
Yeah.
And you really are I feel like you're seeing so much around what needs to happen with us first. and then stepping out and going into other classrooms to do it. I just really appreciate you going into, again, what I see now in the chat from Elisé, the honesty, that vulnerability is hard to do, and you leaning into that. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I ask Rafa a question?
You
Sure.
sure can.
How did that feel when you were kind of doing that shift and that change? What were the feelings for you and like watching the game unfold?
Well, you know, different things. I mean, the first thing that you don't know if this is gonna work because it's the first time that we're doing it. And you know, my students are 11, 12. That's a whole universe, you know, in their mind. So some of them were afraid. They didn't want to talk. They didn't want to. They came just, but well, didn't know what to expect. But then when they saw that it was just playing, because that was it was just playing, they started, you know, becoming more relaxed. Some of them, they were more willing to participate, to, you know, just come up to the table of four and try to do their part. But one thing that I have to say, you know, especially when Jamila was saying, talking to me, or talking about what I was saying, is that I realized that creativity is something super important for teachers, and that requires to be creative. I mean, it's just like be out of the box, do something completely different. Don't be just, oh, I'm gonna go with the safe part or with the thing that I know it works. No, I mean, I understand that you cannot go crazy in your life, but there should be some structure, things that you know it works. But on the other hand, I really believe that we cannot be just like okay with everything as it is, because we know that the society have a lot of issues, and we cannot just say, okay, well, I'm doing what I can. No, you're not doing what I can. You can do way more. So yeah, a lot of stuff, but at the end of the day, it was great because I saw that the students were, you know, having a good time, and some of them asked me if we could do it again. So that is great.
Whew. Thank you for that. And Jessica, thank you for that question. I feel like we need to do 3 affirmations and a question. Like, it just happened organically. And that was just a lovely question, I think, to end on. So thank you. And thank you, Rafa, for sharing. Love to you for that.
I felt like last year was a really big practice year, and I was excited to start off in September with the project of starting the transformation cycle again within my own space, and then to also be with my lovely group and working on it with another school in the district and guiding them through it. And I think the more practice and talk about it, the more refining happens for me, and I understand the transformation cycle even more as I keep doing it. So it's been a great restart again, with the intention to indigenize the drama space and bring some more indigeneity into this work, and feel brave doing that and courageous, because sometimes we feel like we're overstepping or we're uncertain. And what I've learned is that there are resources and there are people to guide and support us through this, and that the students are, you know, more than willing to help us in our vulnerability in that sense. So that was kind of with that, and then connecting and making those students that feel vulnerable in this space heard and feel like this is a space for them as well. So the beginning parts were empathy interviews with some of the kiddos that I had in mind that would be a part of the CoGen group. They are in my drama class right now in different divisions. And so all of their different divisions bring a different dynamic. Some of them are really loud and outgoing, and some of them won't engage at all. And so all of them come to the CoGen group uniquely. We also talked about, I liked, Jamila, last year how you framed it for me when I said, well, I don't know, like engagement's not a problem for me, and they come to my class. They don't go to a lot of their other classes. So we started talking about why they come to this class and what makes them more successful in drama sometimes than in math, and how could we maybe, you know, spread that love to the math classroom. What would they like to see in some of their academics or their other explorations that would make them feel success? So that was kind of our starting point, and we went from there. So then in the CoGen group, I just want to share a picture of the students. We had a CoGen meeting today, and I think that the picture speaks volumes, and it is not reflective of how you would normally see these students in the hallway. Oftentimes there are hoods up, there are earphones on, and there are sad faces. And this is the picture that I currently have of them working. Laughter, joy, they are brainstorming ideas for how they want some of their Indigenous culture brought into this classroom. They are giggling about it. The chips help, of course. They love coming to chip parties. And they came up with the idea, with a little bit of help with the Indigenous principles of learning, that storytelling is really what will connect them deeper in this space. And that they would like an elder to come into this space to tell one of the cultural stories. And they chose the story of turtle and eagle, and that they would like that shared with the class. So I will facilitate. So I met with Elder Bonnie today, and we talked about how Bonnie will tell the story of turtle and eagle. Lozen, that is on the left writing the notes down, is passionate about making earrings out of seed beads and wants a follow-up activity where students choose colors to go along with turtle shell, and they can either make earrings, a bracelet, or they can fill in turtle with colors representing what they felt, heard, or saw during the storytelling from that activity. So we are in the process of moving forward with that. 1 minute left, and maybe I'll just share 1 minute from their CoGen today, that because they articulate beautifully.
Gen group and what our next steps are. We've brainstormed some ideas about our storytelling lesson that's going to indigenize our connectivity in our classrooms. We're excited to meet with Elder Bonnie in the community for her to help myself and our leaders in this space facilitate this lesson for our classroom. What is our hope for what we see from this activity moving forward?
For it to be in more classrooms than just this one?
For it to be in more classrooms than just this one, absolutely.
Oh God. What was the question again? I'm sorry.
What is
our hope?
What
is our hope for like the next kind of semester basically, or whatever?
Or what this activity does for our class.
Okay. Classes. So I'm personally, what I hope for what this activity is going to do for this class is like kind of just so then some kids at least are able to understand, and maybe listening to the stories like
not just listening but meditating what they learn from the stories.
And like Queen said.
Yes.
But like I kind of just hope that like when they read the stories, they're not really, you can hear the people on the other side of that wall.
I know.
Kind of like sharing them with other people.
Yeah, I think that they just articulate really well. They're really wanting other students to also do some deep-seated listening and learning. And when they said meditating on what they learn, I thought that that was really deep for a middle schooler to articulate. And I'm really proud of the work that they are doing. And I also feel like this is not anything against the work we did last time, but we were so much on an agenda of meeting like every month that I feel like we're doing this on my own this year. It's release of time frames a little bit for me, and it's a little bit more authentic in how it's rolling out. Yeah.
Thank you, Amanda, for sharing. I'm going to open it up to the group for what touched or moved you from her.
I think because, Lauren and I both know, and Elisé know those kiddos. So just to hear those words articulated from those kiddos, and just to see just in the photo how much more alive they are, like they're radiating, they're glowing, like, and exactly as Amanda put it, you would often see them like hoodies up, really keeping to themselves. And it's almost like the shell, the hard exterior, it's like melted away. And it's so beautiful to see those kids just like that.
I also just want to say it's amazing that you're supporting another school to go through this process too, and just sharing what you learned in such a short period of time and expanding it beyond just your own school.
Yeah, and as a math teacher, I really appreciate that you're doing this, you know, moving the engagement that the student experience in doing, you know, drama, theater, whatever, into math, you know, exploring what are the connections. This is fantastic. That's something that always intriguing me, you know, it's intriguing.
And Amanda, I just want to draw attention to the detail and the openness with actually listening to what the kids want and the depth of cultural wealth that came out of that sharing. Like we just heard like 2 minutes, right? But the level of depth from the storytelling to me asking for an elder in the space, to me being able to use earrings, for me to be able to tie that to the colors of to be able to do all those things, like that level of cultural wealth, we miss so much. And for me to even just imagine the experience for an Indigenous student or any student, for their culture to be brought into that degree, Amanda, I just want to see that everywhere. That really was extremely compelling and just beautiful. And I feel seen, and I'm not even the kids. Like you saw me, even, you know, it was really powerful. So thank you for sharing. Lauren, I'll pass it to you and then we'll keep going.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to say, knowing those students and how much that means to them, I just love seeing that photo of the big laughter, and I can hear it. And so I'm so happy that they found such a safe place with you. And in that group, it is really, really great to see that photo and hear their words. So thank you for sharing that. It's awesome.
Can I share one thing? I know I'm a witness, but I have to. We had some guests from the Yukon First Nation come, and 2 of the students you saw in that picture have taken on huge leadership roles, and they stood side by side on a screen talking about their land-based learning and the school and in front of their parents, and they led. These students last year did not look like that. They did not look like that. I almost want to cry looking at Sam's smile and laughter there. It's night and day. And I just thank the teachers for pulling out what's inside all of these kids. And the one Black student in that picture is new to our school. And I find it, and she's a beautiful, exuberant young lady. And she is an ally among these kids, and they've scooped her up. It's just like a neat little bunch of kids. It's so good. Thank you.
Shane, we need to add a piece to the protocol around feelings, because I'm feeling a lot of feelings.
What's coming up for you, JD?
I'm completely overwhelmed. So we're not going to get into, I'm just completely, I don't have, we're going to edit all that out.
No, it's real. It's part of it. You're in this community too.
I'm just, because I remember all of you all from the beginning, right? And it's not to say you all weren't amazing, but I remember the questions you were asking and the things you were holding and the hard times, really challenging times, and the uncertainty and the times we pushed and all of that. And then I'm overwhelmed because we talk about the importance of cultural wealth and voice and trying something new. And Rafa saying this piece around, like, I can't stay in the box, right? I can't do it. And I can actually do it. It's just too much. And I'm supposed to be facilitating. So we don't have a feelings part for now, but we'll back pocket a feelings section for later.
Why did I come here? It's more about change, like what I've talked about. I get bored really easily. And also, we're in such a period of complete social upheaval. It's like everything that was true last year is no longer true. Things are changing so quickly. because of he who shall not be named, right? Our former president. But just, to keep growing and to keep changing. And I have had even more reflections listening to you all on what I decided to share. Because I also did do the empathy interviews with all of the kids and at the beginning of the year. And that really opens up some of the learning, that I'm going to share. I did a cogen group with my advisory, which is 11 kids, because I could not convince kids to come in at lunch this year. Not yet. And the topic that they chose was school lunches. They wanted to, change them. They're gross, blah, blah, blah. And after some discussion, it was pretty clear that there was a strong division. And it was a racial division. And so I went to a school counselor and I asked for some input, facilitating what I was observing. And together we created a list of individual reflective journal questions. Because I guess what I got too from the empathy interviews is kids aren't comfortable talking about this as much at this point. And so these were the questions designed, for some introspection. And it was journaling. There was no pressure, for them to talk about it. And they really focused on the two that I put in yellow. For whatever reasons, that's what I got out of their journals. Who are the people who feel grateful for the free food, and who are the people who want to change the food? And, some of the kids were very aware of the division. And then there was a student who just wasn't ready, I felt, to look at it. And they got very upset in one of the earlier discussions because I just asked. I didn't think it was an outlandish or inappropriate question. Because I said, why do you care? I mean, because some of these kids who are making a big deal out of it are the kids that bring their lunch and wouldn't eat it anyway. And this was the journal response. It was painful to read. And so, my learning from that, I had a discussion with her after I read that where I apologized. And this is the thing in my learning and the empathy is I didn't restate my question. I didn't push it because I understood the way she felt because of my own uncomfortable experiences where I felt judged by others in affinity groups. That whole fight or flight. And what I've realized is, self-awareness of racial divisions has to come from within. It's like you can't tell an addict to stop. People can't be pushed into an enlightened state. It's a journey and it's self-directed and private. And if I wasn't going through this difficult journey on my own, I wouldn't be able to be empathetic with the kids. So because of, like I said, I didn't push the questions and I had a sense that they were uncomfortable talking about it together because there were racial divisions. And after the work that's done in this workshop and other workshops, I find myself more looking for the reasons behind student behavior, ignoring a lot of it. And I find myself much more empathetic. But then I also wonder, most of my learning, it's one thing for me to take workshops and do this work, but and understand it intellectually. But, when you're boots on the ground, I feel like my learning sometimes comes at the expense of the kids, which is difficult to see that, I think white people make a lot of stupid mistakes these days. Myself, I should talk about. And then, talking about public learning, I took this to a non-white lens. And, you know, the things that I just don't see. And he said, the brown kids' life experiences tell them, be quiet or you won't get any. He said, who picked this topic? I said, the kids picked a topic. But there is just that difference. The white kids know they have a choice, and the brown kids have this experience. And so my question is, how does a white educator create a safe space for honest answers in the current political and social climate? Is my 4 minutes up? Please.
Thank you, Lindy, and thank you for stepping into vulnerability and sharing in public with the whole team. We really appreciate that. And I'm going to open it up for folks to share what touched or moved them from what you shared.
Well, I like just to appreciate, you know, knowing you, because we're sharing a wall in between our two classes. So we work together. How, you know, the bravery that that you know you have to put together to go through all this, because it's really becoming very vulnerable in front of, you know, of the student, and also the bravery of just dealing with, you know, what they're saying and trying to understand and you know, empathize with them and being on their side. You know? When it's a positive thing, it's easy, but when it's not something so comfortable, it's not so easy. And that's why, you know, I'm trying to highlight that idea of going out of my comfort zone and do something different for them. So thank you for doing that.
I appreciate your willingness to sit in uncomfortable moments of your own learning through your journeys. And I know it's icky, but like, you don't just sit there, you also actively move through it, and you reached out to the counselor and you got other people to, you know, work alongside you so that, you know, you didn't just take a back seat to it. You really kept moving through it, Lindy. And yeah, I don't have the answers, but I appreciate the work that you did there.
Thank you.
And just to add in from the chat, Shane said, it's a profound question. Is my learning at the expense of my students? I wish more educators would ask that. And Jessica said, thank you for that amazing display of vulnerability, which I think we could probably all, however many of us are on the call, tap on. 10 times tap, or however many, because I really felt you wrestling with this as you were sharing. So thank you so much, Lindy, and for sharing, going out on that limb with the public learning. You did it. It's there. You did it.
I think I knew kind of with the intention, obviously it was going to benefit students regardless, but I was really more curious about like the impact or shift it was going to be for me. And I think all of us really go along with the notion that, well, of course we believe in equity, of course we practice it, but it's always superficial. Like I've just really found that what we think we subscribe to or what we do subscribe to is a lot more in depth. And until I started working through this process, did I really genuinely realize how superficial it's always been. And then just to be confronted with, you know, the layers of biases that you actually have subconsciously, it's incredibly humbling. So I think my biggest shift has been just kind of like my mindset and how I approach kids. As the kid is not a student, you look at them as a whole first, and then you really approach them as a child first and foremost, and then honestly a student kind of last at the end of the day. And then within moving back into French, we've been blessed with a lot more time. So there was, you know, an ask of, well, can you focus a little bit more on the social emotional? So in redesigning some projects, it was all based around identity, culture, and heritage. And it's not just like a French classroom, it's a language appreciation classroom. So really designing, like thinking of it narrow-mindedly as French, but now opening it up to cultures and heritage and just the wealth of learning that comes from understanding your identity and where you come from. And then just, you know, reflecting back on the epistemologies map, when I really sat with that, I was quite shocked at, you know, the layers of how I was raised and how much that impacted who I am. And sadly kind of the perfectionistic type A that becomes a teacher. Like that's really, really kind of ultimately why I went into teaching, is that's just, I was a product of, you know, the system. So there was that. So a real big focus around designing my lessons around indigenizing my practice, lessons around belonging, social emotional learning, kindness, and empathy. And then kind of really asking kids about the feels, because when kids aren't feeling successful, it really comes out in behaviors. And then when they are successful, like asking like, well, how does that feel for you? And then just seeing that kind of like that shine in their face is really quite beautiful. I've also found myself from an empathy interview I did this year, the kids really brought up when a teacher raises their voice or shouts, and even if it's not directed at them, but the class as a whole, like how that makes them feel. And it just destroyed me. So there's deep listening, but then the next step is really like taking action. So softening my voice, going quiet instead of raising my voice, closing my eyes. And the kids know, like when I go quiet, that means something. Really kind of infusing a lot more like words of praise and affirmation. And not that we didn't tell our kids we're proud of them, but like really every single day finding something to praise a kid for, or even just using terms of endearment or like terms of love, because some of these kids don't get that on the daily. And I think they really, really need it. And then I think my big was my little buddy CL, him coming back to the school. I had asked, please come back and visit, let me know how things are going. But I did genuinely feel like once he moved off to high school, I'd never hear from him ever again. And this is a kid that should never want to step foot back in this school, in this space. You know, this is a kid that didn't feel safe, didn't feel supported outside of, you know, a couple few. And then just to have him come back, it made all the difference, and it just really reinforced keep going. One kid is enough, you know, making that shift and change for one kid is everything. Oh, I did forget to say that it has blown up in my face, my soft approach. That has gone very far south before. So just to say there's it didn't always work. And I was told by my focus student support to toughen up a bit.
Shane kicked us off in the chat. She said, seeing them as a child first and a student last.
Lindy had one in the chat too.
For me, if one student comes back, I feel like I was a success. Thank you, Lindy.
Jessica, just knowing your story with that student last year and that student's experience, I'm really, really happy that just goes to show that we just may not know exactly how a student is feeling in our space. So I'm so happy that they were able to come back and visit you and have that positive full circle moment, kind of reconnecting with you. That's great.
And in the chat, Lindy said, I struggle with that 5-to-1, 5 compliments for every diss. I struggle with that. And Amanda said, love the words of affirmations for students. They need practice for positive self-talk and affirming words from others. And Jessica, I'll just say you're so earnest when you speak. There's just such a level of humility and honesty when you speak. And you have talked so much throughout this process around your personal transformation. You've been super honest about that from the beginning. And here you are at the end, really just continuing to evolve on your own story and really focusing on your children first and students last. So thank you so much for sharing, Jessica. You've been so great in this group.
This process has been really incredible. The camaraderie, and like I was really, really comforted to see everyone's faces and to be in this space, as incredible as that is, where we haven't actually ever met in person, some of you. And so that is just really, really incredible that we've been able to build this connection through this work in this way. So I think it's just reflecting on this whole process. It's been really spectacular. It's really helped me confront some of those perfectionist things, the defensiveness that I've felt as a learning educator, always learning, and maybe being a little bit defensive of not knowing something, and definitely being defensive of when I make mistakes amongst my colleagues. And that's a big big growth that I've come through, that I've tried to overcome, because my position this year is I'm non-enrolling. I have a very flexible role, and I'm working with a lot of students outside of class. And so I see a different side of them. And my dilemma kind of has shifted this year. It stayed along the same sense of, where do students find belonging in this school, and how do they feel like they fit into C&B? And so I've seen a different sense being in the spaces where students are usually, they either elect to be there rather than class, or they're asked to be there instead of class because of their behaviors. And so through my empathy interviews, I chose some students that were a little bit different from the students last year. So one of my students that I really focused on this year, similar to how Amanda described some of our students, you'd see him in the hallway, hood up, a little grade 6 new to this school this year, and following in line with some of the grade 8s that are not making some of the best decisions in the school, in classes. And so he frequented our room by choice and by being asked to come down from behaviors in class. And so I got to know him quite a bit at the beginning of the year. And so after building that relationship, I wasn't really sure how he would engage in an empathy interview. He's a tough kid as a grade 6, but he is such a little grade 6er at the same time. And so I'm just going to play a little bit of the empathy interview that I had, the first empathy interview that I had with him. I'm going to kind of cut it into the clip a little bit. The first thing that I asked him was like, how has the year started off? And he's like, messy. And so I just really appreciated his honesty with that. So yeah, and I'll just play it. So it's not, I didn't video us, it's just the video recording audio. Where in the school do you like to be? Can you hear it?
Connecting Cub Hub.
Mm-hmm. Is that during class time?
Just in general.
Mm-hmm.
Class time. Out class time.
Yeah. What do you like about the Cub Hub?
I don't know. That's just where I go to if I need to take a break or something, or just want to chill.
Mm-hmm.
And Connect, it's just the same.
Mm-hmm. Where do you like to be during out of class time?
Sometimes I just walk around the school, but mostly I go to Cub Hub or Connect and play games with my friends there.
Mm-hmm. What kind of games do you like to play?
Battleship.
Yeah.
And I do like the little puzzles in there.
Who in the school do you enjoy to be with?
From my class.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The grade 8 Leo.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just who I like to hang out with.
Mm-hmm. Are there any adults that you enjoy being with?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You? I forget the person who works in Connect right now.
Miss Borsa?
Yeah, Miss Borsa.
Mm-hmm.
Miss Phillips. Miss Dogs. That's basically it.
Yeah, I'll stop it there. So Connect and Cub Hub are kind of like our SEL space and our academic support space that I work out of. And so this, listening to him kind of created that question, like, how can we bring how he feels and what he's experiencing in these spaces into these classrooms where he's not feeling that sense of belonging. And later on, I did ask him, like, has there ever been a teacher, like, at any point in your time at school, like you're in grade 6, that you've enjoyed being with. And he expressed that he hadn't had a teacher that he had connected with. So in that, I honestly, I was really nervous to talk to his teachers about, okay, like, what can we do? And shortly after this empathy interview, the student was suspended. And so I really wanted to see what we could do to welcome him back into the space, into that classroom, to help create that sense of belonging for him. So I took his words quite literally, and he's like, I like Battleship. So I was like, can we somehow bring Battleship into class when he comes back after suspension? And so I connected with his teacher, and his teacher was so willing to take him from class. So I went in, it was kind of really branching out, trying to work on that teamwork. I went into her class and taught a lesson in her class while she just worked with this student. Well, it didn't work. They just played Battleship and tried to build that relationship first. And I felt with this colleague, I was able to share, like, please don't talk about the behavior. Please don't talk about anything that he does in class. Just get to know him. And she was so happy. And he was like really stoked that he was able to play Battleship during class and connect with his teacher on that level. And I was just so thankful that my colleague was able to, that she was willing to take that risk. Because we weren't sure if he was going to be like, no, I don't want to play. I'm not going to go play games with you. But he did. He was super stoked to go and do that. So I think the biggest thing is just taking the risks, really believing that if you listen, even if, like, I wasn't super creative, like, he literally likes to play Battleship. And so I was able to, try to bridge that between the space where he feels belonging and the classroom. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. That was a couple weeks ago. And then we're going to keep on with that, building relationship out of the classroom to kind of with the teacher to bring that into the classroom, to bring that relationship into the classroom.
I just love how much heart Lauren has, and she'll bring up not being a seasoned teacher, but she is very much the heart and soul of a seasoned teacher. You know, the warmth that she approaches her kids, she puts into practice everything that she preaches. And I just love the way you challenge us to be better teachers for our kids, because she even challenged me, and her one ask of me led to the most gorgeous relationship and 180-degree turn for one kiddo. And it would not have happened without Lauren and her warm demands of the teachers that she works with. Please keep it up.
Oh, are you kidding me? That's so sweet. Thank you.
That I was like, you're like this quiet, understated, like, warm demander. Like, to be able to have that conversation as a fairly new teacher with a peer and be like, don't talk about the behavior. Like, you just set an expectation and you set the container for exactly what needed to happen. And I also want to just double tap on that listening isn't always this like deep spiritual thing. Sometimes it's just like, you like Battleships, we're going to get the Battleship in the classroom so that we can connect, because that's listening to this child and where he feels safe and seen. Like, you really saw him and did the hard, heavy lifting of bringing your colleague around. So I'm just really impressed. Great work.
And I'm just going to add in from the chat. Lindy said, that is so cool. I enjoy being with you. That is also so cool that you were able to communicate with the teacher in a non-threatening way. Elisé said, I know the teacher has played Battleship with that student more than that one time. Win-win. It's happening. Yes, the container was set. I'm going to turn it to you, Rafa.
No, I just want to, just say that the fact that you say, please don't talk about the behavior anymore. I mean, it's important because it's just, and it's clear and it's smart, because it just say, okay, this kid has been suspended already. So the consequences are being through already. So this is done. Now we have to start over and celebrate that you are back here and highlight that you belong here. So that's a smart move. That's a wonderful and also moving decision, you know. And the other thing is just that it takes the whole village to educate one kid. So that's what you're doing. So congratulations, you're very inspiring.
Yeah, I'll just tap on to Rafa. I think it's awesome that that's such a great example of making our learning public with our colleagues. You took some information that you had with that student and you shared it. And our kiddos need us to advocate for them sometimes because they might not feel comfortable having that conversation with that homeroom teacher. And you bridged that beautifully. And that is making our learning public. I think such a great example of it, Lauren.
Thank you everyone for sharing. And Lauren, you said, you know, I wasn't that creative with listening to the student. One of the things that grinds my gears the most is when we hear students say all that and they're like, they just want to play games. They just want to, no, he said, I want to play Battleship. That's exactly what you should do. The thing that the kids say that they want to do. He said it very clearly and you listened to him. It doesn't have to always be this crazy thing. I want people to hear that. It doesn't always have to be this crazy thing. It's about listening and do I take action based on what you have asked me to do? And sometimes it's a new out of the box idea. And sometimes they're just super specific. Give me the Battleship and I will, you know, start to build a relationship. So thank you for doing that. And I just appreciate you all for being in this process. We're going to get ready to close. Lindy, I know you got to jump off. That's okay. Sending you so much love, Lindy. We just want to close the space out. And then, of course, like if people want to stay and just ask us questions about how we can continue to work together in any way, we can hold that time. But Shane, I'm going to turn it over to you to just help us synthesize and process all this learning.
Yeah, I just, I'm like smiling so broadly. I just feel really, really excited, really like, blessed and kind of a buzz by all these little windows into your classrooms. And it just feels like this quilt. I don't know. I just keep picturing this quilt, like stitching together all these little stories and these students and these moments. You know, the beautiful child throwing her head back in laughter, the Battleship, you know, just all the babies finding their way, your student Jessica coming back to you, Rafa, the picture of your kids playing math games. Like, I just feel so in all these spaces with you. And I think that's kind of the heart of this work, right? Is our interconnectedness, that we belong to each other and that's what our school should feel like. And you guys are doing that. You're making that possible with your students. They're so lucky to have you. So I want to turn it over to our witnesses for the last couple minutes.
Well, I'll be brief. I started a few things that I heard from each of your stories. So just this was one step. I need to keep exploring. Spread the excitement of drama to other classes, bravery and vulnerability, wealth of culture, shifting for one child is enough. If you listen, you can create bridges.
Yeah, I just saw so much engagement and excitement and how people are starting to grow the work. So sharing it with another school, it's like this is our final session, but I definitely feel like at our school, it's something that will continue to grow and inspire people either, you know, and I saw that with the teachers that spoke, like, you know, Rafa connected with our 8th grade math teacher and they did something together, you know, and Amanda's sharing with another school, and Lindy started this conversation with her advisory that she then pulled in the counselor, and they were talking about the food at our school. And I just see it's really a place where, you know, looking at our agreements, no one knows everything. Together we know a lot. And I feel like this was, you could see from the reflections here that this was a container that really fertilized and nurtured that. And so it was really wonderful to hear the reflections from the teachers, and it also gives me the hope and belief that this is both ending maybe for this experience, but a beginning and a continuation. So I really appreciate that.
I just want to thank everyone as well, because I think this has been a very transformative experience for each of us based on what was shared. It really is about teaching for understanding. I think back to when Jamila started the meeting, and what she did was she gave us time and space for the adults to get their thoughts together. And it calls that idea of symmetry. Like, if we as adults need that time to process, we have to give that time to our kids as well. And, you know, even going so far as a random generator to put people at ease. So it's like you come into a space and it's not a point at who, it's let's come to this together. And Rafa, when you spoke, your intention about equity practice, then shifting to, you know, these cogen dialogues, it's like, this is verbiage we're all using in this group now. It's been normalized, but I heard about how the vulnerability piece is hard. And it was amazing to hear about leaving behind privilege. Like, this is different language that we're speaking now. And it moved many of us as we heard you. Also, when Amanda talked, there was just an authenticity of excitement and almost like one of those before and afters for those in our school, because those children didn't look like that last year. They just didn't. And it's amazing to see, not only are they engaging, but they're taking leadership roles on. So this has moved us, and they are welcoming other students, and the change is happening. And so that ability to pull this out of students is leadership, and it's leadership of the teachers and at the intersection of the classroom. Lindy, I really love how you continue to want to keep growing and changing, and in the dynamics of our political world and all of those intersections, you still leaned into that, and it was difficult. Like, I have to tell you, when I saw the picture of the food, that's another battle we have going on at our school right now, the waste and garbage. And I mean, I saw that, I thought, is that our picture or is that their picture? And it's interesting how schools are on the same pathway, wherever, whenever, but looking to the students for the agency and the willingness to sit in that moment as well. Lauren, just again, I really appreciate, you seem to bring comfort out of people, Lauren. I've even had moments where I went to Lauren to talk, because she has this, she's like an old soul, new teacher, old soul, but it's the calmness and this deep listening that you convey, Lauren, that makes playing Battleship to a teacher sound like that's a great idea. And so, you know, I would like to just say, yeah, as Rafa said, that was a smart move, and it really was. And so just finishing with what Shane said, yeah, this is a master quilt, a really beautiful patchwork quilt between two different schools that have so much in common, and all of us in common as learners. And the work will continue. It's just the beginning, I think, but I feel traction. So thank you.